We start with tonight's big number, 500,000. That is the number of jobs the Trade Department expects to get back. As more businesses reopen under the extended MECQ in NCR+, 400,000 supposedly will come from personal care services like salons and nail spas. 100,000 are expected to come in from dine-in services in restaurants.
Recall that when ECQ was reimposed back in March, 1.5 million jobs were lost. That was trimmed to 1 million displaced workers when restrictions were eased to MECQ. And according to economic officials, the country loses 30 billion pesos in wages each day under MECQ. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Personal care businesses and restaurants in areas under MECQ are now preparing for operations. This as the shops have been allowed to reopen beginning tomorrow, Labor Day.
The Trade Department says this will cut job losses, with more Filipinos expected to be re-employed with the easing of restrictions. Dale De Vera has the big story.
Workers at this barbershop in Quezon City are busy cleaning up and disinfecting their equipment. They expect customers to come in early, as select personal care services in MECQ areas have been allowed to operate again at 30% capacity beginning tomorrow.
For now, siguro, mag-shifting lang muna kami. From our regular 4 barbers a day, gawin muna naming 2 barbers. And then on weekends, siguro that's when we would have 4 barbers.
Ebarles says while they have been used to occasional temporary closures, their business remains at a loss. Reopening the shop will somehow help them bounce back.
We still pay the rent, and then, of course, yung barbers and staff namin, we give them minimum allowances. So, yun. And ito nga, we're glad because we'll be able to operate again, at least for our barbers and staff. Meron silang kikitain monthly.
Are skeptical, no?
Miggy Moreno, our restaurant owner, shares this excitement. Dine-in services in NCR Plus will also be allowed at 10% capacity. Although he's worried about having to cut down on staff, he says this is better than nothing.
Our income really is from the dine-in customers more than the takeout. So, okay na kami. We'll take whatever will be given. We'll start with 10%, which is for us, it's baby steps to something hopefully better.
Moreno says they will implement an alternate scheduling system for his staff so everyone can earn.
We still reverted back to yung scheduling, skeletal force, ika nga. We only have at least maximum of 3 employees on duty every day, but at least to cut the overhead expenses for us. So amenable naman sila because according to our staff, it's better than not having jobs at all.
Both business owners plan to apply for a safety seal certification to invite more customers. The Trade Department says the certification is not mandatory, but it will give customers an assurance that the establishment adheres to COVID-19 protocols. The agency adds that allowing increased capacity for certified establishments will be an incentive.
Without safety seal, they're allowed to open already at 10%. So, that will not stop them. You're not given the parang information. With that information, you're giving the customers the option to choose.
Latest data from the department show that reopening more business will cut job losses in half. For News 5, Dale De Vera, we are One News.
Could the reopening of more establishments lead to another spike in COVID-19 cases? To give us his take on the matter, we have with us Philippine Medical Association spokesperson, Dr. Oscar Tino. Dr. Tino, welcome to The Big Story.
Hi, magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat.
Magandang gabi po.
Gretchen.
Apo. Malinaw naman po yung pakay nitong pag-reopen. Malinaw din yung benefits on the side of the economy and trying to save jobs. But what are you anticipating in terms of the number of COVID-19 cases? Will a rise in numbers be inevitable, you think?
Well, I think we have seen the example of what has happened to us na dumami po yung kaso natin ng COVID because of yung relative reopening of the economy and everything else that come with it. No? that comes with it. Ang punto kasi, we have to have this balance between life and livelihood. And we have, of course, in the Philippine Medical Association, we would like to admonish everyone na still to follow strictly the health protocols being practiced o yung dating pong pinapractice na health protocols, dapat ituloy po natin. Yung pong ating pagsusuot ng face mask, ng face shield, staying away from crowds o yung pong social distancing, and of course, yung pong mga iba pang mga dapat nating gawin para hindi po tayo mahawa ng COVID-19. Tulad ng yung advice nga po, huwag mo kumain sa mga restaurants or lumayo muna sa mga grupo-grupo o yung pagkikita-kita ng malapitan po. And I think we all have to follow that particular protocol. Kasi talagang pag hindi naman natin sinunod dyan, definitely we're going to have to experience the same thing over again. And we expect a surge again of cases. Napakahirap po ng ating dinadanas ngayon. Even now, hindi pa rin po masyadong kontrolado yung pong surge natin ng COVID-19.
Yung Dr. Tinio, yun naman pong yung protocol sa level ng mamamayan, malinaw naman po. And the reminders remain there. But during the time na nag-lockdown tayo and during this time of, in effect, another timeout, where things put in place on the side of government, on the side of hospitals, on the side of LGUs, what is different now in terms of capability to deal with COVID?
Well, we know better this time. Alam na natin kung ano yung mga dapat natin gawin. In fact, alam na natin kung paano nagamot yung o mabawasan o ibsan ng mga simptomas ng ating mga pasyente. Kaya lamang po, sa dami po ng naging kaso natin, na-overwhelm po yung ating mga ospital sa Metro Manila at yung po mga karating bayan. And mind you, noong panahon na yan, talagang napakadami po ng pila natin ng mga pasyente na nag-aantay ng mga natanggapin o ma-admit sa mga ospital. Even then, we're already prepared, hindi pa rin po natin kinaya. So we wouldn't want to have the same experience again because we definitely will have to lose a lot of people from COVID-19.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Dr. Tinio. That was Philippine Medical Association spokesman, Dr. Oscar Tinio. There are a couple of changes in quarantine classifications for some parts of the country. The local government of Ifugao has appealed for tighter restrictions. They want to be placed under MECQ until May 14. Puerto Princesa in Palawan also wants tougher classification. The city will now be placed under GCQ for the whole month of May. As for air travel, the ban on entry of foreign nationals, save for those coming from India, will be lifted tomorrow. But travelers will have to meet several requirements. Pre-booked accommodation for at least 7 nights, swab tests on the 6th day, and valid visas except for balikbayans, but the maximum capacity of inbound passengers at ports per day stays.
Simula 1 po ng Mayo, pwede pong makapasok at pinapayagang pumasok base sa mga nakaraang IATF resolution ang ilang mga dayuhan.
These are the other big stories tonight. Retired Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio wants the president to wake up. He reminds the chief executive China does not own the West Philippine Sea. It was a long wait for the pilot day of the online registration for the national ID, but registrants have to wait some more as the website remains down due to a technical glitch. And P-pop sensation SB19 continues to make waves internationally. They just made history as the first local act to have been nominated for a Billboard Award. These big stories after the break.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Oxygen supply supposedly may still be enough for now, but with COVID-19 patients in home care rushing to get their own supplies, could there be a looming shortage in oxygen here in the Philippines? Mobile journalist Stanley Gahete gives us the front seat to that story.
Medical oxygen is key to treating people with respiratory diseases, whether they are at home or in hospitals. According to the World Health Organization, 1 out of 5 suffering from COVID-19 needs medical oxygen to ensure oxygen in their blood is sufficient. At the peak of the surge in Metro Manila, the DOH told medical oxygen suppliers to start regulating the distribution and sale of oxygen. With so many people rushing to buy oxygen on their own, hospitals were starting to feel the pinch in supply.
This is not rational, no? Kasi una, it might cause you harm kung hindi nyo naman po talaga kailangan. Pangalawa, baka naman po yung pong supply ng ospital ay na madedeplete.
Medical oxygen supplier Aline Clerigo said at one point they were having trouble meeting the demand.
Before the peak of the pandemic, sobrang dami naming supplies. So when the peak came, talagang ubos siya.
With hospitals brimming with COVID patients, demand for oxygen has spiked. Patients who are confined at home are placing added pressure on the supply.
They would rather na bumili na sila ng oxygen tank na hindi na nga sila ma-admit sa ospital pagkatapos hindi pa natin maibibigay yung needed na autotherapy support na kakailanganin ng mga pasyente.
But images from India are raising concerns over oxygen supply. Lisander Ragodon is medical director of Providence Hospital. He says because of this, hospitals are carefully and constantly recomputing their oxygen requirements.
Now, assuming there will gonna be shortage or anticipated shortage, we need also to limit also the number of patients because we won't be able to manage them well.
For now, Ragodon says the demand for oxygen may be manageable, but preparing in case they reach the red line.
Nobody can tell, no one can tell about if there will gonna be shortage. It depends upon to the number of cases then.
Stanley Gahete, We Are One News.
Wake up! This is retired Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio's message to President Duterte in light of China's lingering presence in the West Philippine Sea. In a virtual webinar by the Philippine Bar Association, Carpio reminded the President that China does not own the West Philippine Sea. Carpio also said the President's ignoring of the 2016 arbitral ruling does not render it worthless.
Shout out loud so that President Duterte will wake up from his sleep under his kulambo and admit to the nation the truth. China is not in possession of the West Philippine Sea.
Meanwhile, in 1PH sa Totoo Lang, former Defense Secretary and Senator Orly Mercado said China's incursions into the West Philippine Sea is not a matter of utang na loob, but national interest. Mercado also warned that China may meddle in the coming 2022 national polls through cyber warfare.
This is political warfare. Makikipagkasundo siya, o sige, joint ang development natin yun. Pero mamamaya, mawawalan ka ng dahil sa na parang nag-agree ka na. At napaka-importante din, pati cyber warfare, and hindi ko inaalis sa China na makialam sa election by way of cyber warfare.
Time for our next press look at some of the day's big stories. The Health Department said distribution of the latest 500,000 doses of Sinovac has started in the NCR Plus bubble. 15,000 doses of Russia's Sputnik V vaccine are also expected to arrive tomorrow. The government-procured shots have been shipped from Moscow on April 29. The jabs were initially scheduled to arrive last April 28. Israel can't donate excess vaccines to the Philippines due to legal issues concerning pharmaceutical firms. But Israel's ambassador to the Philippines, Rafael Harpaz, tells News 5 that they're studying ways to allow other countries to purchase their excess doses. Harpaz assures that the Philippines will be a priority once contracts and procedures for procurement are settled. Israel has inoculated 80% of its population, including 30,000 Filipinos. And a group of pharmacists opposes the unauthorized distribution of ivermectin. The Philippine Pharmacists Association remind the public that the anti-parasitic drug is still unregistered, making its distribution illegal. This statement was made after House lawmakers Rodante Marcoleta and Mike Defensor distributed ivermectin drugs in a barangay in Quezon City despite warnings from health officials. And for the big story in sports, tryouts for the national volleyball teams this coming SEA Games have started this week. But turnout for the women's team was underwhelming. Why exactly is that? Find out in my report. All roads led to Subic for the country's finest in volleyball. Inside a bubble, national team hopefuls for women's and men's indoor volleyball went on tryouts. They will form the squads for the Southeast Asian Games in Hanoi this November. The Philippine National Volleyball Federation invited 40 volleybells, but only 16 showed up. Many players cited safety concerns for not attending. Participants had to undergo RT-PCR tests 48 hours before the tryouts. A mix of veterans and student athletes still came to test their mettle, including Japan V-League champion Jaja Santiago and five-time national team veteran and former team captain Abby Maraño.
Siyempre, kami yung magkakasama last SEA Games. Hindi sila naka-attend kasi meron silang mga personal reasons, may mga decisions sila. Pero ako, nirespeto ko talaga 101%. Sa akin talaga, magta-try out talaga ako kahit ako lang mag-isa.
There were also first-timers, including Ateneo Lady Eagle Faith Nisperos, who had to get the rust off after having no on-court training for months.
I felt slower, but I think the highlight was parang everyone, same kami lahat na walang court ng matagal. So, nakita ko yung passion.
The Ateneo stalwart says playing with the veterans will help her improve her game.
Gusto ko pala sila maging makasama. Like, example, Ate Jaja, then sila Ate Abby Maraño, sila Madre Barro, and si Mayin Paat. I'm still young, di ba? Then nakikita ko sila. So, nakaka-excite lang.
If turnout was low for the women's team, the men's squad had 31 attendees out of 40 invitees. They're looking to exceed their silver finish in the last Southeast Asian Games. But SEA Games 2019 team setter Joshua Retamar is just glad to see his teammates once again.
Sobrang tagal na namin hindi nakapagsama-sama sa paglaro ng volleyball, sa training. Tapos, yun, nagkakasaran pa rin na ang bigat mo, ganyan.
Mark Espejo, who came from his stint in Bahrain, says he can't wait to get into a bubble training for that gold medal finish.
Back to zero kami ngayon. So, kailangan talaga namin ng mahabang preparation din para kung ano yung nakuha namin last SEA Games, mataasan pa namin.
With the challenges of the pandemic, it was already a treat for many fans to see volleyball slowly get back on its feet. Gretchen Hall, We Are One News. Time for another quick break. When we return, the launch of the national ID system was hyped up as it promises to ease transactions with a single ID. But day one didn't turn out to be as smooth for registrants. And homegrown SB19 is joining the ranks of BTS, Blackpink, and Ariana Grande. They have just received a Billboard nomination. The details after the break.
evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. With thousands hoping to register for a national ID, day one of online national ID applications was put to a halt after the portal crashed. Mian Los Baños with the story.
Sa PhilSys, my forever. That's the Philippine Identification System's promise to upcoming registrants of the National ID system. A PhilID gets rid of the need to present several IDs in transactions. It also streamlines the distribution of social aid and broadens access to financial services. Most importantly, it does not expire. The agency hyped up applicants with a countdown to day one of its pilot online registration happening today, Friday. But things did not go as planned. Technical glitches marred day one of PhilSys online registration. Applicants are supposed to receive a one-time PIN upon providing their email and contact number on its website. But hopefuls ended up waiting for nothing. Users aired their sentiments on PhilSys' Facebook page. In jest, one user said a love interest has better chances of arriving first than the OTP. Another user said PhilSys should have anticipated the influx of registrants. PhilSys apologized for the technical difficulties after it received more than 40,000 requests within minutes of launching. It vowed to provide updates as soon as its website is already up and running. To register, applicants must fill out a form on the PhilSys website. They must book an appointment with the nearest registration center. Mobile registration centers in strategic locations are also available. Upon entry, an applicant's biometrics will be taken. They must also present primary or secondary requirements, including a PSA-issued birth certificate, any government-issued ID, company ID, and school ID. After that, applicants will just have to wait for their PhilSys number or PSN and ID cards to be delivered right at their doorstep. Pre-registration had started last October 2020. To date, PhilSys said at least 28 million Filipinos have already registered. The agency seeks to have 70 million registrants this year. Reporting for News 5, Mian Los Baños, we are One News.
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. Thousands of workers will take to the streets again on May 1, the first Labor Day protest since the pandemic. In a Philippine Star report, Kilosang Mayo 1 Chairperson Elmer Labog said some 5,000 people are expected to join the demonstration. They will plead for a 10,000 peso cash aid for the poor and jobless, a 100 peso daily wage subsidy for workers, and 15,000 production subsidy for farmers. From Business World, Nomura Global Research expects the Philippine economy to grow slower at 5.5% this year. This due to Metro Manila and other major economic hubs under extended MECQ. This estimate is lower than their previous 6.8% forecast. And this from News 5, more modular facilities have opened to help decongest hospitals. There's one for COVID patients undergoing hemodialysis at the National Kidney Transplant Institute in Quezon City. It can accommodate 20 patients daily. A modular facility at the Batangas Medical Center, meanwhile, has 21 isolation beds for moderate COVID patients and 10 ICU beds for severe and critical cases.
And here are the other big stories from around the world. COVID-19 infections in India have topped 18 million after another world record number of daily infections. More than 379,000 new infections were recorded in India over the last 24 hours. Grave diggers are now working around the clock as India records more than 3,600 new deaths in a single day. That is the highest number of new fatalities since the start of the pandemic. In Israel, at least 44 people were crushed to death at an overcrowded religious bonfire festival. Tens of thousands gathered at the tomb of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai for the annual commemoration of the Lag BaOmer. The festivities turned into a disaster after a section of the stadium collapsed, causing a stampede. The event was one of the largest gatherings in Israel since the pandemic.
Another big story in sports. NBA Sixth Man of the Year frontrunner Jordan Clarkson still wants to lend his services to Gilas Pilipinas. In an interview with The Game, Clarkson expressed his desire to suit up for the Philippine team once again. Clarkson made his only appearance for Gilas during the 2018 Asian Games. Since then, Clarkson has been making waves in the NBA as the Jazz sits comfortably at the #1 spot in a tough Western Conference. Despite this, Clarkson said that he keeps the national team at the back of his mind, eager to win with Gilas.
Yeah, that's definitely something I want to do. So hopefully everything lines up. And I'm free during that time and that moment, and I'm able to go put that Gilas jersey back on and go win us something.
What? What?
Nagsimula no pero wala na akong balak na tapusin.
K-pop sensation SB19 just made history at the 2021 Billboard Awards. SB19 is the first Filipino and Southeast Asian group to get a nod since the awards were launched in 2011.
Lahat ng aking basura, pupulutin natin nila. Kahit saan pa ako mapunta.
SB19 is contending with household names like BTS, Blackpink, and Ariana Grande for top social artist. As cherry on top, Philam internet sensation Brenman Rock made the announcement.
And we have the Filipino boys, just like me, representing SB19. Let's do this.
Top social artist is fan voted based on an act's interaction with fans through streaming and social engagement. Bretman, meanwhile, was also recently nominated at the MTV Movie and TV Awards, unscripted. He's gunning for Breakthrough Social Star for his own reality show Following. Another homegrown talent going international, President Nadine Lustre. On Instagram, Nadine shared how she made it to a digital billboard in the famous Times Square in New York City. The billboard promotes Spotify's Equal playlist series, which comprises of female artists around the world. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Every time you open Microsoft Word, you notice the default font is, of course, Calibri. Well, Microsoft is calling it quits after 14 years. Microsoft posted a photo addressing how it loved its time together with Dear Calibri, but they've already outgrown the relationship. The letter signatories, not one, not two, but 5 font families, namely Bierstadt, Grandview, Seaford, Skina, and Tenorite, were Calibri's potential replacements. And yes, no Comic Sans, no Chiller, no Papyrus among the contenders, but Microsoft is still keeping its doors open for Calibri as it remains available in the font catalog.
Sabi na nga, walang forever talaga eh.
Parang may hugot yan
Hindi, nakakalungkot naman yung balita na. I mean, it's good to have change, but people like me, probably you also, we grew up with that. Childhood.
I don't know. I think inabot ko pa Times Roman when it was the default.
Yun din ako!
Oh. So you're not that young.
No, you're very young. Well, that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again Monday at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
At ako naman si Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.